All right, so I want to go back and revisit this and hopefully kind of maybe make things a little bit more clear where they may be a little bit murky. And I'm talking about from my lectures. So if we're trying to find out and understand ancient Israel, um, the Bible has a very vivid and clear discussion of a really conceptualization of how ancient Israel came into being, in a way that you don't see with other ancient texts. I mean, for the most part, I'm reading my daughter right now creation stories and other myths from the Norse gods, for example, with Odin and Thor and all of that. And her and I were both noticing, how interesting they are, but also a lot more harder to follow. And the mythical aspect is a lot more outrageous. Outrageous is fanciful, maybe is the better word to use. The biblical stories make really kind of tell a narrative that really feels like a believable history. If you take away the religious or the elements that have to deal with supernatural things, then nothing for even an atheist to feel questionable about. But so then again, what I'm trying to say though is that if we look at the archaeological evidence, we go back to an ancient people that were identified, and then several centuries later, something a little bit more concrete. And according to the Bible, things really start with King Saul and then the Davidic kingdom. And this is kind of considered a quintessentially important aspect of ancient Israelite identity as well. And it's very significant to Christians. The Ethiopian monarchy claims to be descendants of the Judaic line of King David. Okay, and for reasons because it is the kind of blessed bloodline, if you will, of the Bible, despite the fact that the stories of King David make him and his son, King Solomon, to be kind of like the Epic of Gilgamesh. If you remember, Gilgamesh was kind of like a hero, but not a good hero. These men both in their stories are not people that you really like and that you do at the same time. And, that's interesting, right? Okay. King David actually has one of his loyal soldiers murdered so that he can take his wife, even though he has lots of wives and concubines himself. God is going to punish him for that. But that's an extreme act, right? Murdering a loyal soldier just to take his wife when you already have a lot of women yourself. And yet he is a celebrated hero. And the stories about him are all over the place. He kills Goliath when he's a young boy. He takes a slingshot, so the stories goes, and kills this giant enemy, and he plays the harp for the sad and yet jealous and misanthropic King Saul. He is a shepherd boy. He is a warrior king. He is a womanizer. He does all these things. And then King Solomon, the same. He just has lots of women in his lives, and he gets seduced, so the story goes, to worship the gods of the region, and falls out of favor with God somewhat in there. And yet at the same time, you can name your kids Solomon and David in a Christian or a Jewish tradition, religious or secular, and they're seen as heroes. So it's a complicated thing, and this is the story that comes along with it. So I just kind of wanted to paint a picture of that, and then also again explain how the stories of the Bible that are written about them and the stories about these ancient kingdoms are somewhat at odds with archaeological evidence, and certainly debatable. Okay, and that's the part I want you to really understand. Okay, now this in temple to Yahweh, which is really important, is celebrated, but at the same time, King Solomon is like any king. I mean, how do you get money and funds to build expensive temples? You use slave labor, you use cheap labor, you tax the population. This is just essentially just how things are done. And the story, even in the Bible, is that when he dies, some aspects of his rule are leaving a bitter taste in the mouth of some of the subjects, and there is a lack of stability being left over. Okay, and so what ends up happening, and I'm just gonna kind of be more brief on this, is that it turns into what you could normally call a civil war, a breakup, and so the north becomes Israel and the south becomes Judah. Now, this is how it looks on the map. This is a very kind of confusing thing, and I want to say something about the term Israel. Israel is the term designated for a particular person in the Bible, which we'll go over a little bit later. It then collectively becomes the name of all of the tribes that were from Israel, these various tribes. And then also Israel ends up being referred to as the ancient United Davidic Kingdom, and then separate often for the north part, and then the south is Judah. So Judeans, we could assume, would consider themselves a part of Israel in terms of its tribal history, but a different nation at this time. You might be confused by this. I just want to clarify, I grew up in a very biblical tradition, and it wasn't until I took Western civilization in my late 20s, or I should say early 20s, that I actually even understood this by seeing a map. So even like by reading the biblical story, even growing up reading these texts, it can be a little bit confusing. I'm hoping I clarified it instead of making it more confusing to you. If you want some more clarification on that, again, please, contact me. Okay. All right. So then what happens? The northern kingdom of Israel is eventually going to become destroyed in 722 BCE. And it's interesting to say that this becomes considered the lost tribes of Israel. There are so many different belief systems that are going to claim that a certain group is the lost tribe of Israel, because this northern section gets conquered by Assyria and essentially wipes out Israel. The Samaritan religion will be sort of what's left of it, and that's another topic I'd like to give later. But there's some white supremacists who claim that the British Isles were occupied by the lost tribe of Israel, and that they're in fact that the white people of the British Isles are actually the real Jews, the real Israel. I believe that Mormons believe that the Native American tribes on the North American continent are actually lost tribes of Israel. So these are all for a whole nother topic and debate, but I just want to point out that this loss here of the northern part becomes significant on the memory and thought and conceptualization of people for centuries. Okay, now then we get left with Judah, and Judah, obviously, as you saw on the map, is especially going to be a small nation, so it's not hard to conceive of it getting trapped between other superpowers of the time. Babylon, coming out of the Mesopotamian culture we talked about, is going to dominate this little part of the world. And by the 6th century BCE, there'll be the destruction of its first temple. Okay, and Judean elites are taken as captives to Babylon. And here is where the Jewish religion really takes shape. And I think that that is a very huge consensus view by Jews and Christians alike, But this is where we really see the shaping of the Jewish religion in this Babylonian captivity, and it becomes very significant in terms of the way Jews are going to think about themselves in history as well. So I'm going to stop here, and then I will move to the next lecture.